NSFW, ex-prisoners of Reddit, what are your horror stories, things you wish you could unsee, and how did you cope with it while locked up? The sound of a guy getting lock-socked by several other inmates. In some county jails they have 190 water taps. They're there so inmates can make oatmeal, soup, or coffee without a microwave or any kitchen appliances. Well, sometimes when there were fights, you would see an inmate fill a cup with 190 water and a glob full of Vaseline. Then he would throw it on his opponent. Watching that will stick with me for a while. Mainly the terrible scream the man made as the Vaseline stuck to his face. He was taken to medical right after that. He had third-degree burns all over his face and hands. Worked in a max security prison. What I never saw, thank heavens, was the guy who prostituted his colostomy bag opening for other inmates to have intercourse in. I was told he died from one of the many infections he was treated for over the years. The one I did see that I wouldn't mind unseeing was the man pleasuring himself with a Campbell's soup can on one occasion and a shampoo bottle a different time. Yes, he set it up to be seen. Corrections officer here. The worst part about jail is all your friends want stories but you eventually become numb to all the shenanigans. It's all just jail shitty. We had a guy in Seg who would stick pencils up his dick hole. It's just what he liked to do. And it is illegal for us to deny him access to writing his lawyer. So every few days he would ask for a pencil and paper to write his lawyer. Now you know this mother effer is just gonna stick that pencil up his dick, but what can you do? So you give it to him. Ask for it back an hour later and he just grins at you. Off to the hospital he goes. Then there was a guy who got a hold of a latex glove, pissed in it, then threw it into a guy's face like a water balloon. The piss went all over the guy and the glove stuck to his face. Should have given him one of those giant novelty pencils. Best story I heard was that there was this inmate who was a big scary guy and he would punch people out, put jelly on their dick and then suck their dick. He didn't do it for enjoyment or anything, he is just f***ing crazy and needs to stay locked up. That's just all jelly dick. He's in for tax evasion. I was in juvenile hall and I was looking out my little window. I seen these two dudes dancing with their dicks out. They were directing the show to this female correctional officer. She was some butch looking lady. I've been to the drunk tank a couple times and the last time was the most serious. I was in there with about 5 other guys. One guy comes in being arrested with his wife for meth. They are both looking at a good stretch. He starts talking to her through the vents, crying and apologizing. She's crying too. None of the guys in there bothered him or gave him shitty. We all knew it was the last time they were going to talk to each other for a long time. It was oddly beautiful. These two criminals saying their goodbyes and confessing their love for one another, while everyone minded their business, which is rare in there. Even the guards didn't stop them for a long time. Eventually she was moved and we all sat in silence for a while. It made me think that love looks past good and evil. Not too crazy of a story, but I thought it was worth a share. Edited. Not a prisoner, but I helped a customer that was just released from prison. In my work you frequently find out more about your customers than you'd like. He's a big guy, 6 feet 4ish and 300 plus pounds. Talking about the mistakes he made to wind up there, and some of the horrible things he witnessed. Then he starts shaking and says, "You always think if it happens to you, you can fight them off," and just sobs. He affirmed my decision not to commit crimes as long as I want my starfish to be export only. I want my starfish to be export only. Not a prison, but I work in a prison. Got called to check on an inmate who was on a 1 suicide precaution. They were going through some major psychosis and they were chanting in their cell while laying on their back. Proceeds to start itching their face. Then pluck their eye right out. We tried to get them to drop it but they proceed to plop it in their mouth. Chewed and swallowed it. Okay. I'm out. Never went to prison myself. But I had a friend who was falsely accused of robbery, eventually cleared of all charges. Apparently, about a month in, He was in the courtyard with a couple of his buddies. His friends started to explain how there was this guy who just arrived and how he had supposedly arped his daughter, 8-year-old, on multiple occasions. Whilst in the courtyard, they spot this gang starting to attack the newcomer, a young, greasy guy. Nothing terrible besides kicking and beating at first. Quickly it proceeded to scalp him with a contraband razor. Even more terrifying, one of the gang members started to mutilate his genitals with the razor, calling him a child f-ker and such. It took a solid 5 minutes for guards to break up the crowd. To this day, I still wish he was making it up. Interestingly, the hardest, meanest crims who commit murder and other heinous crimes all seem to at least have some standards. i.e., don't fiddle with children. Looks like the ones with good stories are still locked up. I was sentenced to 4 years in California prison and ended up doing less than half of that. No real horror stories. I mean, I didn't even hear of any rapes happening. There were fights and riots, but it was nothing horrific. I saw some guys shoot heroin, which is the only place I've ever seen it. But that's not exactly a horror story. Until you realize that it entered the prison inside someone's ass. The worst thing is that your life is on hold while everyone else's life outside continues. And when you get out, you expect things to be like they were before you went in. But they're not. I did 3 years on parole, which I thought was excessive for a first-time offender in his 40s. But it was just a mild inconvenience. I've been out for over 8 years. Not a prisoner, I know. But when my mother was away in an all-female prison, she was roommates with a 20+ something who had life for cooking her newborn baby and feeding it to her husband. There was also a time when they were doing a cooking class and 2 women were fighting over the last of the sprinkles, so one threw a pot of boiling water on the other, burning her bra strap into her shoulder. He'll start the obligatory not a prisoner, but my dad is doing 60 years in TDC, Texas Department of Corrections, for drugs. And he told me that a few months ago, probably more late last summer, that somehow the prison mixed up a gangster disciple with a vice lord in the same cell. The gangster disciple tied up the vice lord with his bedsheets and beat him to death with a fan motor. My dad said you could hear it going on, but I mean, what are you gonna do about it? Yeah, no. After that the whole unit got put on lockdown for like a month or 2, I think. Because the jail thought that they might have a gang war on their hands and didn't want people spreading rumors or interacting too much. So for 23 hours a day you are in a cell, and then I think like every 3 days you get a shower and you get bagged lunches as well. The story my uncle told is he was in a cell with like 16 guys. Occasionally the guards would open the door, spray a bunch of pepper spray, close the door, put on gas masks, and then come in swinging batons. My dad was a correctional officer for a while. Who had a guy who was in for life, and a few years back another inmate came at him with a tube sock full of pool balls. He hit him in the temple with said sock. The lifer looked at Sock Boy and asked him why he wasn't running. All the dicks, man. You got a shower in a room with 3 other dudes, and no matter how hard you try, you see dicks. Deformed dicks. Micro dicks. Dickzilla. So many dicks. Ever since I was in prison, I've been trying to unsee dicks. Being a correctional officer, I've seen a fair bit, spending the majority of my time in jail working 70 hours weeks. Craziest is a guy that had poor mental health, should have been placed in an asylum, that basically had no pain receptors. Had him in segregation for a slew of reasons. I was monitoring him one night and he was sitting in the corner in the seg cell with his back to the door. I'd ask him if he's okay for a verbal response and I'd get the usual "I'm okay, boss." Great, he's fine. About an hour later and a number of checks later, I come around at about 3 AM and he's staring at the porthole of the door at me. He's bitten through his wrist down to his tendons. And he's smiling at me. Blood-soaked mouth pulling on his wrist tendons and ligaments like guitar strings. Very chilling. Never been to prison, been to county jail my fair share though. It's not a walk through the park. A lot of people who have been to prison have ended up in Podunk County Jail near me. So you get the hard mother effers who don't give a FCK because they're going back to prison, they're just in transit or paying off a debt they owe to the podunk county. So you have real prison dudes hanging around people with failure to appears and parking tickets and petty criminals. Not fking fun at all. I've been on 23 hours lockdown. I've seen a guard break a inmate's arm and then the rest of the staff refused medical attention till morning. I've seen people get beat up over food. I've seen drugs come and go. I've seen weapons being made out of anything. I've heard a million stories. Read a lot of TTY books. It's been 11 years since I got out of prison. And I still have 4-5 dreams a year of going back. Short of losing a child. Nothing terrifies me more. I'll wake up panicked at 2 in the morning. Sweating. Mind racing. Sometimes I'll go to the living room and weep. Anymore I don't try to go back to sleep. If I have a back in prison dream and go back to sleep. I was in Cook County Jail. And there was this foreign kid with only gym shorts and a t-shirt, middle of winter, in the bullpen with me. I got an I bond. So I was waiting to leave. And this kid just kept asking the guard what was happening. He didn't understand the judge or something. The guard ignored him. And I left. What a horrible place to not know what's going on. Not an ex-con but a guy I used to work with, RIP, went to prison at a young age for assault with a deadly weapon. He managed to smuggle in a phone. Another guy took it from him. He wasn't going to do anything until someone called him out on being weak. His solution? Lawnmower blade to the guy's skull. The guy lived and clearly was never stealing from him again. He got out and I got pretty close to him. He was shot a few months ago completely unrelated to his past. Miss that guy. When I was in remand awaiting trial I woke up to a full 24 hours lockdown. During the night a guard accidentally unlocked a child rapist cell and half a dozen other cells before going on a smoke break. I got to see from my cell door window a huge blood stain in the common area carpet. Workers pulled it up and scrubbed the blood out of the concrete and replaced the carpet. The next day is when I found out that the 6 other guys held the child rapist under the blanket and took turns jumping up and down on him. That's when I learned that child rape, animal cruelty are things that no inmate will tolerate. I didn't feel remorse for the pedo and the 6 guys all got extra desserts from the rest of us for the rest of the month I was in there. I didn't realize animal abuse got the same stigma and dealing with that pedos get. I'm very glad to hear it though. My cellie got into a fight in the day room that dragged on into our cell. He ended up getting the top half of the other fellows right via Tyson method. Pretty mild considering things. I suppose there was that one man in the hole who would paint tea murals everywhere. Schizophrenia-esque stuff written on the walls and ceiling entirely produced from his own fesses. Obligatory not an inmate. But worked at an infamous prison as a tour guide. A supervisor had been reading a newspaper in a common area. Got up to go perform a short duty and returned a few minutes later to find the newspaper gone. It didn't show up until a few days later, when they discovered that an inmate had taken it, twisted it into as solid an object as they could, and used it as an LDLDO. Safe to say he didn't want to finish reading the newspaper. This is old so I might have missed it but I've finally got one for this. My buddy, previous co-worker, worked IT for a prison. Apparently they got an inmate transfer for another woman to be brought in. She was processed by a guy and then added to the general population of women. Well, her first week, one of the guards was doing rounds and heard screaming in one of the cells. Apparently the new inmate was a pre-op MTF transgender and was railing all the female inmates. She was admitted under her female name and since she was processed by a male, she was not forced to strip naked and they didn't get to see her Longfellow. No way in hell. Everyone gets stripped. Whoa. 3 hours and 0 comments. Not a prisoner. But I have guinea pigs in cages. And man, life on the inside is rough. Not a prisoner but I volunteered one summer for a program answering letters from prisoners in ADSEG. Basically long-term solitary confinement. and putting them in touch with legal resources, etc. Read a lot of horrible shit. Guards withholding meds. Exchanging prisoners' meds. F-king with meds to FCK with the prisoners. F-king with their food or bringing it at odd intervals. Taking all your shit away as a punishment so that you're literally sitting in a cement room alone for days. Putting prisoners in restraints for hours at a time. And so on. The worst thing about prison was the dementors.